NFL Week 11 is here, so that means some more DFS for our fantasy football lineups. As always, with our red-hot picks, we take a look at the top game lines. Ed, this week the top game line is Bengals versus Steelers. How are you feeling about that before we get into it? As a Bengals fan coming off the bye, are you feeling hopeful?
No, it will be. Let's put a prediction out there. It's going to be, let's say, 46-40 to the Steelers.
After the Bengals were up 30 points going into
the quite possibly.
So Steelers are 5-point favourites, so that would make sense for your prediction, Ed, as well. Flacco and Chase is an expensive yet tempting stack, as it always is the last few weeks. But I think also Flacco and Higgins is on the table if he saves a little bit to spend elsewhere. Last outing in this matchup just a few weeks ago, Flacco was QB6, Chase was wide receiver 1, Higgins was wide receiver 13. Chase Brown was a little bit more disappointing, 12.0 fantasy points, his RB 19. But he's come to life over the last couple of weeks. So he is someone I'm probably a little bit interested in at that price point as well, especially on DraftKings at $5,700. Noah Fant also continues to be interested, and we're not confident in him. We've spoken about this on our streaming show, but it looks good for 4 targets, is a touchdown threat, and is only £2,600 on Fantasy Game Day. So that is what does add to that appeal, even though we're not feeling overly confident. You're never confident when you're spending that sort of money on a player at any position. Other side, once again, last time they had this matchup, Rodgers was QB7, Jalen Warren was running back 7. Wide receiver went AWOL, and the tight ends did all the heavy lifting. We will come back to that later on. At the price point, though, Rodgers, DK Metcalf stack feels like it should. I don't know what went wrong for DK last time around, but it feels like it should pay off. I think Jalen Warren is my preferred pick here on the Steelers side of it. But Kenneth Gainwell, given the number of points the Bengals are giving up to fantasy running backs, the most in the league, he didn't last time they met, but Gainwell feels like he could return quite nicely at that price point as well. Definitely fantasy potential. This matchup has form. Who would you be going for if you wanted some pieces of this, Ed, which I think we both will do?
It's the Steelers side. It's much better value. We've talked at length that the Bengals defense is not getting any better. And, a Rodgers Metcalf stack is such great value. And I agree. I don't really know why Metcalf didn't impress in the previous game, but I expect him to this time. And whatever stack you put in there from the Steelers' perspective, I just can't see it not getting decent points.
We will talk more stacks after you have signed yourself up to Fantasy Gameday app. If you're playing in the UK, and use that code THFF1 for 1 free play with your first paid entry. But your stack of the weekend is a very tasty one on both formats, but quite good value, I think, on DraftKings this week as well.
Definitely, yeah. Certainly much better value on DraftKings than it is on Fantasy Game Day. Yeah, I mean, for Fantasy Game Day, it's quite a pricey combo, Herbert and McConkey. If you're going for it on Fantasy Game Day, it leaves you with a touch under £4,300 per player for the rest of your team. But I think there is, some definite big points to be made in this game. Herbert is the 4th most expensive quarterback, which is fair enough. He's currently QB3 in fantasy. And after a less than convincing start, McConkey's emerged as Herbert's top target. And over the last 6 weeks, he's definitely been a top 10 quarterback. So I think McConkey is actually decent value in both formats. I think in Fantasy Game Day, he's the 11th most expensive wide receiver, which I think is very good value. They play the Jags this week, who are giving up the 5th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks at a touch over 20 points, and the 10th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers at a touch under 35 points. So I think Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey would give you a very good return this week.
I am going absolutely the obvious way. I was always going to go as soon as I saw the announcement that Jameis Winston is back. I cannot genuinely. I'm really excited to watch because he's so. After he stops talking before the game, the guarantee of the week is going to be a soundbite of him trying to sound profound, but actually sounding a little bit daft at some
Did you hear
point.
the quote this week? Something about, because Brian Dable got sacked. He was something like, "They're giving me the keys to the bus," or without. It was basically saying, "There's no manager, there's no coach, so I can basically do what I want." And I was just like, brilliant.
So exciting. He sounds so exciting. It really does. So yeah, it was the only way I was going to go. Darius Slayton was in the mix. I've lost my AirPod. It was in the mix, but that hamstring injury was still not confirmed. That does worry me. I just think, yes, with Jackson out, this is the dart throw that appeals the most. It leaves you with just over £5,000 on Fantasy Game Day, 5,700 on DraftKings, and that's all that is certain. That is the only thing we can guarantee with this. You could come out with loads of points. You could come out with 7. Both, I think, are equal possible outcomes. In 7 starts last season, though, he had 4 top 12 weeks, including 35.98 fantasy point, 497 yard, 4 touchdown, and 3 interception mega show in week 13 against a decent Broncos defense. So that's the one thing. The Packers are no shirks on defense. No, they've not been lights out like we maybe hoped, but they're not poor. And this is how unpredictable Jameis Winston is. I really hope the Packers come out, get an early score, because then that just completely unlocks the most ludicrous of plays from Winston and some fantasy delight. Say Slayton may not be out there, so Robinson could be busy. I will 100% be playing this in at least a couple of lineups this weekend. Are you going to be going along just for the hell of it, Ed?
Oh, 100%. I'll have a Jameis stack in at least one of my £3 games. Just to add to the enjoyment of watching him be back. I think all NFL fans must be excited to have Jameis back this weekend.
We're going to be sticking with the same game for the captain pick, and your pick, Ed, is clearly the most appealing one. We often go for 2 captain picks, but this week we felt there was one that just is obvious.
Yeah, he's expensive, but I think he'll get you big points. Josh Jacobs against the Giants. First up, the Giants are giving up the third most fantasy points per game to running backs at 26.79 points. He's had a rushing touchdown in every game apart from week 3 against the Browns, and he's had 2 rushing touchdowns in 3 games. I mean, there's been a mixed involvement in the passing game, but a bit of an uptick in the last couple of weeks where he's had 9 receptions. It's going to be a popular pick, of course it is. But as we often say, sometimes the obvious choice you have to take to ensure you're in the mix. And with no JT this week, then I think Josh Jacobs is that obvious pick. And if you don't pick him, you might get left behind.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. It looks such... There isn't a shoe-in. Often we say things look a shoe-in and it doesn't turn out. But if you had to put your money on it, this is absolutely where you're going to go. That would probably mean you're going to need to save yourself a little bit of money in your lineup as well. So we're going to look for a bargain basket pick as well. I'm keeping it simple, Ed. I'm going for a tight end who's playing the Bengals. We mentioned the tight ends against Bengals earlier on. We said we'd come back to it. Now, Jonnu Smith's averaging 4 targets per game. The Bengals conceding the most fantasy points per game to tight ends. If I'm completely honest, in this matchup, I prefer Pat Freiermuth. That's why he's one of my streaming tight end picks on our other show. But as he's £1,000 more than Smith, it's the obvious gamble if you want to save a little bit to spend elsewhere and still have a little bit of touchdown upside. Speaking of which, last time they met, Freiermuth, Smith, and Washington all scored a touchdown and were all top 18 tight ends on the week. Pat Freiermuth was tight end 3. That's what I say. He is my favorite. And to be honest, you can still save money and play Pat Freiermuth, but we can't go for a bargain basket pick that is more than £3,000 on Fantasy Game Day. So that's why we are going for Jonnu Smith. How many touchdowns will he score against the Bengals defense? Have they learned how to tackle over the bye week?
No. Tight ends do well against the Bengals, and it could be 1, it could be 2, it will probably be all 3 again.
Next up, and finally for us this week, we are looking at, for our UK viewers and players on Fantasy Game Day, the brand new game, the Triple Crown game that they have got for us. Really, really simple. each week they will give us a choice of 3 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, and 3 wide receivers. And you need to choose who will be the highest scoring of those 3 each position. Get those all right, you take a share of the prize pot. So whatever is in the prize pot, if, say, 15 people have all got it right, they will split that prize pot 15 ways. Nice and simple. And there's decent odds of getting in the mix. When you only got 3 of each, it is 3 times 3 times 3. So there's 1 in 27 chance of getting it right. What I like about this game, we said it on our other show as well, Ed, is the fact that, yes, you can use those metrics and obviously in looking at all the fans, as we always do when we start this, but there's also a lot to be said about going for a couple of picks on vibes as well when you only got 3 options. I've got a bit of a hybrid of that. So I've gone for Justin Herbert as my quarterback pick this week. He's got the Jaguars. They're giving up 5th most in the league to fantasy points wise to quarterbacks, 20.97. I fancy him to have a decent game. We've said about Josh Jacobs being our captain pick, and I do feel safer going Josh Jacobs here for the highest pick, but I really want Bijan to have a great game, so I'm going to speak it into existence and pick him against the Panthers. They're giving it 21.95 fantasy points against running backs. That's middle of the pack, but Bijan Robinson is an absolute kind of stat buster when it comes to certain performances, and I think he could have a big game in him. And finally, we have not seen absolute lights out, week in, week out, mega performances from Justin Jefferson, but this week he gets the Bears, who are giving up the 5th most fantasy points in the league to wide receivers. JJ McCarthy's hopefully managed to get tuned in a little bit more. Maybe it will JJ McCarthy. Maybe it will be 9 that turns up. We shall see. But they are my picks. Justin Herbert, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson. Ed, have you gone the same as me with my obvious correct selections, or have you veered off elsewhere?
No, we've gone completely different for this first week of the new game. With my quarterback, I've maybe gone a bit more on gut rather than the favourite. I've gone for Baker against the Bills. I just think Baker was superb last week against the Patriots. Yes, the Bills are strong against quarterbacks, but I trust in Baker. I think he's due another good week. I have gone obvious at running back. I've gone for Josh Jacobs. They're giving up, the Giants are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs, as we mentioned earlier. So I think that's pretty nailed on for him having a good week. And I suppose in this game, stacks count just as much. So if I'm going for Baker, I'm going to go for Emeka Egbuka against the Bills. The Bills are giving up just over 30 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So they're in the middle of the pack. But Egbuka also looked excellent last week. He came back fully refreshed off the bye after a quiet few weeks before the bye. So, yeah, I'm happy to have Baker and Egbuka. So, yeah, my 3 picks are Baker Mayfield, Josh Jacobs, and Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah, although you don't obviously get the payoff points-wise from the stack in the actual total, you're right. If Baker's going to have a big game, Egbuka's likely to have a big game. So, yeah, it does make perfect sense on that. I'd be happy with either of those things turning out because I'm loving watching Emeka Egbuka this year. So that will hopefully work out and we get some cash money and cut that price pot, Ed. So if you have not played on Fantasy Game Day before, don't forget to use that code THFF1 for 1 free play with your first paid entry and get yourself some DFS lineups in. So whether you're playing on Fantasy Game Day or Draftkings, absolute best of luck this weekend, unless you're in some matchups alongside us as well, in which case pick some lesser teams to give me and Ed a little bump up. Anything you want to add about Week 11 DFS, Ed, or have we said all the things that we need to say?
I think we've said all the things we need to say, Mark.
Why don't you call us our lifting then, Ed?
With pleasure. I think it's time for Malcolm to take us home.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.